All right. Welcome to DadMode, God, Grit, and Goals. I am so excited to introduce our speaker today. And I want to introduce you to a gentleman named Steve Anderson. Steve is not just a dedicated father and mentor, he's also the creator of the Best Dad program, a guide that has transformed the lives of many dads striving for a better work-life balance and deeper connection with their children. Growing up in a challenging family environment and navigating his own journey through faith, the military, personal growth, Steve's gathered a wealth of experience, and he's here to share his insights on fatherhood, the impact of our upbringing on our parenting, and how to balance the many roles we play as dads in today's world. So whether you're a new dad, a seasoned father, or somewhere in between, this episode is packed with wisdom, practical advice. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's dive into a conversation with Steve Anderson on DadMode, God, Grit, and Goals. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. It's good to be here.
Good to have you. So you're up in the cold north. Tell everyone where you're from.
Yes, Minnesota, small town just north of the Twin Cities where it's currently like 5 degrees before wind chill.
Yeah, before wind chill, exactly. Yeah, we're in Dallas. My wife is always talking about, well, the feels like temperature.
I just earlier today dropped my son off at the airport. He's in college, going back to college in California, and he made sure to look up the temperature.
Oh, wow.
And it's 59 where he's going, so it's like about a 51-degree difference, I think it was at the time he was checking. So he's done.
He's got the
Minnesota winters,
thick blood. Yeah, he's ready to go thin it out.
Yeah.
So, well, Steve, I thought we'd go through today and just give people a bit of your background and maybe your personal journey. And so let's jump in and, let folks kind of let us know who you are.
Okay. Well, so Steve Anderson, father, I've got 2 boys, one obviously college age, and I have my other son is 16, right? So I married, I adopted them. Their biological father has passed. So but I've been with my wife for 10 years.
Excellent.
And so I've known the boys since they were, 5 and 9, and now it's like 16 and 20. So that's been, we talked about this earlier before, but really being a husband, being a father, which I came to later in life, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Why did I wait so long? But I know so long, right? Because when I was growing up, my parents didn't have a great relationship. I mean, they actually, when I went off to the Army, I found out later, they were like a hair's breadth away from getting a divorce. So growing up, the model of it's like marriage, okay, but it wasn't something that would be like, oh, that looks like, great.
Perfect. I need one of these.
Yes, right, exactly.
Right.
And that, part of it went to, both of my folks have struggled with my dad with anxiety and depression, and my mom was bipolar, and it took, once she got the medication right, things were, it was just smooth. I mean, I think she went like 30, 40 years without an event, but when I was younger, once or twice a year, there would be either a manic moment or a depressive moment. And so that just added to, all of the stress in the house. So
yeah, and as a kid, you have no clue on any of that. What's happening?
No.
Right? Yeah.
Right.
Who's showing up?
I always had food, I always had shelter, and just that there's on the emotional side, in different ways, my dad was blocked off on one way and my mom was on the other. And so it took I had to start figuring out once I became adult, right, how to interact with other people who are important to me, because we didn't talk about stuff, and so it was a very, to survive, right, thought, okay, I'll just bury these emotions.
Right. Well, mental health, today it's a topic. People understand and talk about it, but back then it was not.
Yeah. And my dad actually he buried his emotions so much, right, that he had a nervous breakdown.
Oh, wow.
It was the only way for them to get up. And so, you know, can't remember the exact age I was, but it was around well, definitely my teenage years, and he was locked up to
Mm.
make sure they didn't kill himself. So I
Oh,
mean, really,
wow.
serious stuff. And yeah, that did. And here's the thing: I think that's important for me to realize too is that as a kid, I thought I actually had control over what was going on.
Mm. Yep.
If I did this, things would be okay. And that was I think a lot of kids do that or whatever we're in as children. We're like, well, this is normal, right? Like shout, you grow up in a family that shouts at each other. Well, you shout, and that's okay.
Right, right.
Or you know what I mean? You grow up in a quieter family, and then you meet and date somebody who's comes from a shouting family, and all of a sudden they yell, and you're like, oh my God, what is that?
Something's
Right.
wrong.
So
Yeah. No, we're Italian.
yeah, yeah, so um it was just I was at a place where I definitely and I'm glad this happened. I mean, I wouldn't if I could go back and choose a different path, right? I would definitely hope better mental health for my parents, right? But the work that I had to do, getting to that place where I could express myself and, be fully present, it's like, okay,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was working. When I finally did meet Katie, who's amazing, I was at a spot where it's like, oh, I can be there and fully present,
Yep.
So there's definitely a, positive outcome out of that mess,
Wow.
right?
Yep, for sure. Um, so one of the things that you had shared with me, um, you know, growing up is that you kind of had a search for meaning, and you found yourself at seminary.
Um, well, actually, yes, I did.
Okay.
But the first place I went for purpose was the army.
Ah, yeah. Okay.
In meaning, right? Because, and I think a lot of men, right? So much of us, purpose really matters, right? It's like if I have a purpose, it's like, well, okay, then I can put up with anything, right? Well, I want to be doing something of value, and uh, you know, growing up, I long for that and that connection and a camaraderie, right? Because typically with purpose, there's some bonding because you
Yep.
find other people who are on that same purpose, and then you get together, and it's like, okay, we got a mission. And so my cousins and my brother were reading World War II stuff. I started reading World War II stuff, and it's like, well, here's people who love each other so much that they're willing to die for each other, right? They've got a
Mm,
cause that they believe in, and it's World War II fighting Nazis. I mean, as far as you can look at, future conflicts that the U.S. has had and go, nah. But as far as World War II goes, it's
yeah.
pretty clear cut that this was
Bad stuff was
not a
happening.
bad
We got
side.
to go. We got to go fix it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my first really taste of having purpose, and I liked it better than high school, in basic training. And that worked for a while, but ultimately it was like I wasn't. I was in during the Gulf War, but I stayed in Texas, so no. Just so I think one day we actually unloaded a truck of soldiers who had been over there, right? So that's as close as I got to any of that, and I learned Polish in the army,
Oh,
which
wow.
I was happy with because of my uncle. Uncle Sig was from Poland, which was really cool. But while I was in basic training, the wall went down and there was basically no more need of Polish linguists. So it's like, okay, what am I doing in here? Time to go to college, right?
Yeah.
Went to college, was doing that. And so when it talks about the meaning, so a lot of veterans that can talk about this, and I experienced too. It's like you go from the military and then you get to college, and that sense of purpose is very diluted uh,
Meaning like it
for a
just
lot.
pulls away from you. Well, it's not as
Well,
purposeful
it's
as
like, well,
in the military. Is that what you mean by
yes, and you're
diluted?
going to school, and it's like, oh, school's the purpose, and that's the thing. But as far as like people working together and going for something,
Oh,
it's diffuse, right?
yep.
Everybody's there for their own thing.
Yes, yes.
Um, and so that's a transition. Like, a lot of veterans have to make, and that was okay for me. It's like, okay, sure, fine. I'm a pretty laid back person for the most part, so it's like, okay, things are different. But over time, I'm like, what am I doing? I got a job. I'm ticking off the things. I got an education. I got a master's degree. I'm working, and it's like I want more than the standard, consumerism, right? I like buying stuff. I got a bunch of crap, so I'm not like, don't own anything.
You're not a
No,
minimalist. Yeah. Right.
right. At all, right? My wife probably wishes I was, but I did want some. It's like, okay, there's got to be more, right, than just earning some money, going on a nice vacation, and that's it, right? Buy some stuff, um, like vacations. And so I thought, okay, well, where is a group that's gonna where might I find this? So I'm like, well, you know what? Church seemed like an okay place to start. I mean, uh I went through confirmation. That was important to me at my church. And then as soon as I could, and the folks didn't force me to go to church, I didn't, because for a teenager, it was quite boring.
Yeah.
Um, so I started looking for churches. Oh, and here's a funny story. I went to one church, went to the service, and then I went and talked to the minister afterwards, and told him, look, I've been away from the church for a long time, and I'm looking for one. And I told him that that it was a Unitarian church, and I told him that, hey, I want to learn more about, uh, what I can learn from Jesus's life, etc. And he's like, ah, you don't want to come here. Oh, why don't you go to this other church? So he sent me to another church, and I thank him for that, right? Because I mean, hey, it's honest, and it's like we don't care that much about it. Go there, and I went to this church. It was um for me, right, I love school, in learning more than school, right? I mean, and this church had a lot of like retired ministers in the audience. It was like, kind of
Mm,
connected to a campus ground. And so sermons were awesome for me. I was like,
yeah.
oh, I kind of like that. Music, again, still more like if you were at the time, I was in my 30s, and if you were in your probably 50s or 60s, you really liked the hymns because that's what you grew up with. Um, and I was there, and sometimes I just like to dive in deep end. And so, okay, I'm looking at this, and I said, well, who really is going to really dive deep into this? And that's seminary. So I looked up the seminaries on campus, and more. I'm not liberal, but I'm more liberal than conservative. There was a liberal seminary, and so I went online, found them, started talking to them, and within a short time, I actually, because of um, where I was and how well I did in grad school last time, I got a scholarship
Oh, wow.
to go to seminary, um, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And that was really the first time I ever did any like deep dives on anything, and really getting to understand it. So that was, um, yeah, that was great. And I got a master's in theology and art because I'm a creative person, so I like writing. And I was thinking about ministry, but I really wasn't feeling that,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and so I got the degree in that. And while this is going on, I'm teaching, community college teacher, at the time English. So I'm doing, teaching, and then at night or when I can, or however my schedule works, going to seminary. And um that was obviously clearly a path on my a major step on my spiritual um, growth. And then what's been cool, we moved, COVID wiped things out, didn't go to church for a couple years during COVID.
Yep.
And plus we moved, um, and Katie's like, okay, um, find a place. If you want to go, I'll go. It's kind of like as far as going to church, um, I'm the one who wants to go to the most in the family,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
So she's like, hey,
Take the lead. I'll
I'll go.
follow. Yeah.
Yeah, get off your butt. And you said, "Hey, check out this. How about this one?" And I went, and we'd been there for a wedding before, and they have a contemporary service. The music's good, right?
Yep.
The sermons, I like them. So it's like, oh man, this is. I actually found a place where I like the music, I like the sermons, and so it's a pretty cool. Uh, I now don't go out of obligation,
Yeah.
right? I go because it's actually I enjoy the music, right? Um, I like the sermons, and it's like, okay, cool. So it's like, wow,
I can connect. I
I
can get
guess I'm a
fed.
church
Yeah.
going dude.
It's funny
'Cause
because a lot of men get dragged to church by their wives, right? We go out of obligation rather than seeking something. So you've obviously been on this journey of seeking something, and you've mentioned music and you've mentioned art. Um, and it's like the sermon itself as an intellectual pursuit is one thing, but the music and the art, and there's feeling, there's emotion, there's all of these things in it, and then community. And so absent any of those, it's a bit incomplete, right? And I think as men
yeah,
we need to connect, right? So
yes, absolutely. In the other thing, and what I do when I go to church, right? When it's time for, and I'll even, be thinking about the lyrics, right, in the songs, but when it comes time for the sermon, you know, I am absolutely, right, what's the lesson for me?
yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean?
yep,
Where can I take this and be better?
yeah. And it's amazing
Or
because you
what
can
do I
find that connection, right? Because these are
oh,
deep truths. So deep truths have application in a variety of domains. And so whatever's going on in your life, when you hear a deep truth, you're like, oh, yeah, that's a good way to think about that, or that applies to this.
yes, absolutely. And even, right, if say I disagree, right, or have a different
Mm.
take,
Yep, yep,
then the mission, then it can be a neat conversation on the way home,
gotcha.
right? Because I do think, right, what our relationship to God, right, is personal.
Mm-hmm.
And 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 it really helps to have a container, right? Like for me, it's being, Protestant, and that's the bigger shape to it, right? But I mean, all ultimately, right? It's like, okay, how am I interacting with the word? And sometimes it's like sometimes I need to push back on myself,
Yeah.
right? And then, other times, this is one of the things that was really cool about seminary is that, number one, the idea of one interpretation was just thrown out the door so fast, right?
Mm.
But not only thrown out the door, but shown why there can be multiple interpretations. Everything from how the word is translated,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is it fear of the Lord or is it awe of the Lord? It's
Mm.
like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
word
yeah.
means both things,
Yep.
and there's trembling connected to both of them,
Yeah.
right? But what so that's a little bit different, and how much of it changed of what, we think of, um, when they're talking about shepherds, everybody knew what a shepherd was, right? And we've got kind of an idea, but so how does those changes,
Right.
right? Or when there's this one guy, Walter Wink was great. I read he had a small book, and it was about sometimes we don't even get the meaning of something like fully of like turn the other cheek.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote about, well, if you're slapping a servant, you slap them with the back of your hand, right? Because you're above them. You slap an equal with your open hand. I did
Mm.
not know there was slapping etiquette, but there was.
Yep.
And he said, so if your master, right, slaps you, right, or somebody above you slaps you, and you turn the other cheek, what you're actually doing is, if you're going to hit me again, you're going to hit me as an equal
Oh,
with the palm of your hand.
interesting.
Yeah, right. And I mean, I think
Wow.
that's right. And that's something that might be taken as um y- as a weakness, or just giving up or over. There's an act of self-worth in it, right? Or
Yep.
self-love, that I am, okay, you might be in charge, but in that understanding of everybody, right,
Yep.
being a child of God, we're equals, buddy. So go ahead and slap me. I can't do anything about it, but you're gonna hit me open palmed.
Right.
That kind of stuff. I was fascinated
Fascinating.
by.
Yeah, for sure. Very interesting. Very interesting. So, let's kind of turn the corner here and just talk about. I know you're a teacher, but let's talk about some of your professional path and some of the insights that you've gained. You know, in your teaching, mentoring, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, so I started out teaching English, and I would also be teaching some English as a second language courses too. So in that,
Was Polish the first
there's
language, or?
no, I surprisingly didn't get to use that a lot in Minnesota.
Okay.
I should have moved to Chicago.
Yeah, there you go.
Um, Plenty. It's like
Where there's more kielbasa.
Warsaw,
Yeah.
Chicago, and then back to Poland for population of Polish people. Um, so one of the things, my whole 20 years that I was teaching, I always had my foot in developmental education, which that is, you can think about people come to college and they're not quite at the reading at the college level, right? Or writing at the college level. So what I liked about those courses is um, so many of college professors have really never been taught how to teach.
Hmm.
I mean, they haven't. They don't. They're oh, you've got your this in chemistry, so you know chemistry. Now we'll make you a teacher. K through 12, you get certified. You learn how to teach, and so and there's a small group of like education teachers who absolutely have been taught how to do this. But in the developmental, there's a lot of how to teach stuff built into learning how to do that and what's important for people to learn, what are the roadblocks. And so I spent 20 years having that as an element of my day-to-day work, right, is helping people to get to where they want to go, to get up to the level that they need. And then midway through, to increase my career opportunities, I went back and got credentialed, which just means I took 20 credits of graduate stuff in education so I could teach in the reading department. So I'm really spent a lot of time spending time on how people learn and what gets in the way of their learning.
Interesting.
And that was when I first started looking into more of the neuroscience aspects of learning. There's a great, easy for anybody to read book called Brain Rules, which was like my starter drug.
Okay.
And that just, for example, just talks about how important sleep is for both emotional regulation and memory. And I think this is really huge for dads, right? Because how many of us are, if we're putting in long hours or we're sacrificing sleep,
Hmm.
right, to get things done, but what we're giving up when we're sacrificing that sleep often is to our ability to really regulate our emotions well the next day.
Ah, which is why I
You
just
know,
like fly off the handle when I'm like, oh, that was stupid. He spilled his milk. Why am I going
right?
nuts? Yeah.
Exactly. Sometimes it's because you're not getting enough sleep, and
That
then
is
you
the
think of
definition of a new father too, I think, isn't it?
right.
You're just not
So,
getting any sleep.
so what do you do with that? And one of the things that was really interesting, and I've got two different numbers from two different neuroscientists, but it was 10 to 20 as far as the naps, how long a nap you should take.
Mm.
Between 10 and 20 minutes, because you don't want to go longer. If you go longer than 20 minutes, you're going to have the potential to drop into REM sleep, which is a deeper sleep. And then if you, in those cycles take 90 minutes roughly,
Mm.
if you're taking a longer sleep, like 45 minutes or an hour, and you get up before that 90 is done, right, or go longer, that's when you wake up and you're more tired than when you fell asleep.
So even worse for you. So a cat nap,
Right?
10
Ye-
minutes, 20 minutes, that's the
Absolutely.
range.
So newborn dads,
Yeah.
yes, you're going to be tired. You're going to get through it, but set timers, grab those naps when you can.
Yep.
And you'd never totally rebuild your loss of sleep like with a 10-minute nap, but you sure do help. It does actually, you know, have an impact. I have one story about my neighbor who
Yeah.
took a 10-minute nap, and he was laughing about it because his wife was always telling him it's not long enough. And I said, well, you know what? I actually just had a class that talked about this. And he's like, oh, send me it. And I'm like, sent him the research that shows about how this is a good one. And they're both awesome. They're a great husband and wife team with 3 kids. But it was funny
Yeah.
because they were arguing, how long should the nap be? One
Yeah.
was like short, whether longer.
Yeah. So
So
even like, whether that there's all kinds of practical ways to kind of, so you don't want to do it while you're driving, but you can park,
It,
10 minutes
well,
from the house, take a little nap, that
well,
then
you know what
finish
I
the rest
did
of your,
too.
yeah. What did you do? What are some
I
tips?
I was going with Well, I was going with my son over on we had spring break and we go up north, and a couple times we've done this and it's been awesome. We go up north, we eat a bunch of pizza and we watch anime and play some games. And
Yep.
that's a spring break for a few days. And we're driving up there and I'm tired and I'm like, man, this is stupid. I'm I'm putting my son at risk to get to this, this important. I want this 4 days with my son. And I'm like, buddy, I'm tired. Pulled over at the next rest stop, set my timer and said, he's got his phone, something to do, and I took a 10-minute nap,
Yeah.
right? And woke up and I'm like, because I don't know why I was tired at like,
Yeah.
10 a.m. But took the 10-minute nap. I'm like, okay,
We're good to
now
go.
I can be a good dad,
Yeah.
not kill us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's go up. So
That's good.
it,
The, yeah, by the way, that's also how you know when your kids are growing up as they get older. They want to nap again. It's like,
yeah.
I love naps. Yeah, naps are great. Well, good tip. Yeah, so what are so that's a good tip. What other things have you learned kind of from the neuroscience maybe that applies to being a dad?
Well, what's cool, I think too, and I'll tell you, so much of this, once you learn it for yourself, you can start sharing it with your family, right? But you know, in appropriate ways and not, I know some of us, right, can be like, now I know everybody do this. Let's make a big, huge change, and I won't explain why. And it's like, no, be careful, gently,
Mm,
introduce these things. But like with the sleep, right? I think one of the first things to do and is model it yourself. Right. If you make a point to making sure you're getting enough sleep, when you can, and not that, with the new dad part, as your kids are older though, it's like, if I'm getting enough sleep, um, it's a lot easier to tell my son, and I don't have to because this guy likes going to bed and being on a schedule. He's a
uh,
unique individual, right? And
yep.
because I hated getting up, going to bed early. Um, but you can start sharing it and using it. And a better thing about the sleep is, if your child is having a meltdown, one of the things you can ask yourself is, okay, is how much of this meltdown is just about the child being tired?
Yeah. Did they just come off a
Y-
bunch of sugar? Did they just, right?
Right. And that's
Yeah.
diet. And
Yep.
how food shapes, so there's the cool things of is you can take that, and once and sometimes the stuff is like you hear it and you're like, oh man, that's obvious, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
getting sleep. But I think sometimes as dads, we need that, like, scientific credibility to knock us over our heads, right? And we can say, "Oh, I don't need to sleep." It's like, no, knucklehead, you do. And if you tried it, you'd probably find, okay, you say you don't need to go to sleep. How well are you doing dealing with the challenges that your kids bring up? Well, I'm good. I hardly yell more than 3 times a day. Well, okay, you're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
doing
yeah.
great.
I watched
Try
a
the sleep.
video the other day that was really interesting, and it was somebody that was talking about down regulating their kids, and they have candlelight dinners together, and it's like, wow, that was
Okay.
fascinating. And I thought, well, that's really interesting because so often what we do is, well, number one, we're not having dinners together because we're just running all over the place like crazy. But that was really important in our family, is making sure that, hey, we're gonna I try and work out my schedule so that family dinners were an important part of our daily experience. And so this candlelight dinner idea was really interesting because it's kind of fun for the kids, but it's also
Yeah.
the light down. And then don't fill them with a bunch of sweet sugar because then they're just right back
Right.
up, right? But if you want to settle down at night, you don't want to ramp it up. And I was the worst at that. My wife was always telling me we got to get him to settle down. Of course, I've been at work all day, so I want to ramp it up. But you can
Yeah.
do that, before dinner. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting, the candlelight dinner idea.
Yeah, that is awesome. And one of the things that just happened, I substitute teach every once in a while, right? After I quit my full-time job to do this full time, I'm like, okay, I've got a flexible schedule. And I thought, you know what? I've been at college for 20 years. I want to see what the other half is doing it. Number one, K through 12. And then the other two is like, my boys are, 16 and 20. So it's like, I want to go back in and, I'm in kindergarten and I'm seeing, 6-year olds or I'm seeing the whole age range of what they're going through, what they're experiencing. So I started doing that about, once every 2 weeks. I'll go in and do a day or half a day. And a friend of mine encouraged me and said, okay, and she's a special ed teacher. And she's like, no, you need to go in and do that too, right? To see that, what that's like in the unique challenges, right? Because there's a lot of parents out there who are dealing with that. And just uh, if you if you can make if you ever meet up with somebody who teaches special education, offer them a cup of coffee, right? And start talking to them, because typically, man, are they good at the emotional regulation, the
Yeah.
how to deal with things. And so where all this is leading to is the value of patience and allowing and understanding and allowing our children to know that they're going to have an emotion. They're going to feel it way more intense than us, but it is also going to, like a wave, it's going to crest
Mm. Yep.
and move on. Right? And there was this boy in a special ed class that I was is seventh grade, and developmentally he was behind a bit, and we're having he's doing his work. We're having a nice, happy kid, and work had been done. He got to use his laptop, and then it was time to put the laptop away. And he just and actually and I was subbing for the first time in this situation, right? And and I wasn't thinking. And this other student just came, took the computer, put it away. She's not supposed to be using it. And it was like, whoa, that was, just basically ripped it right out of his hands kind of deal. And he was not having it. Big shocker.
Yeah.
I would probably be a little ticked if I was holding something and somebody took it. But then you had those challenges. And so he started knocking off the table everything that was in front of him. And then he went to bend stuff. He's going to do some more destruction because that was the way he was expressing himself. And the immediate stuff is move the things out of his reach, right? Because you don't want
Mm-hmm.
him to get hurt, and you don't want breaking things, right? And move that stuff out of the way. And he put his head down, and every once in a while his arm would come up to just see if there was anything there, right?
To
That he
push.
could
Yeah.
he could break. And what I did, right, and this is, I think, something that we can all do sometimes, is number one, I was freaked out is too strong, but I was definitely uncomfortable. I'm going, oh my goodness, what's he doing? Yeah, I was unsettled, but it's like, okay, but that's not going to help him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the other, the parent talked to him a little bit, and he was having nothing of it. And then there was some other stuff going on, so she moved, and I'm just staying in the area, right? Real close, just to make sure he's not going to hurt himself, or something's going to happen. And and then I sat down next to him, but far enough away, right? That
Yeah.
if he, was reached out and upset, he's not going to grab me, but close enough that he's like, okay, I'm here. And he had his time, and he's there, and it's okay. And we're sitting there, and I'm just sitting there with him for a while. And then after a little bit, he likes dump trucks, and he'd been watching a dump truck video, and so he was really angry. Now he's down there, kind of shut off. And luckily, I have a brother who worked for a mining company in Wyoming for a while, and I got to go out there and see the massive dump trucks
Yeah.
that they have in mining place, and they are huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I knew he
Yeah.
liked
The
dump
tires are as
trucks,
big as
and
people. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I start telling him about that, and I tell him about how the pickups are so small that they can get crushed, that they have to have a giant, not well, a pull of flag that's like 20 feet above the pickup, so they don't get run over and crushed. And he is up and looking at me, right?
Yeah.
He's interested. I'm talking about something that he cares about. And then I moved on to my dogs, which then I was able to, hey, do you have any pets? And he had a dog, and he talked about the dog and how he gets the water and stuff. And so, you know, he was through it. We're like having a good time talking about our dogs, and it was, um that was
The
it.
value, yeah, the
It
value of a
just
distraction. Yeah.
right.
And a connection, right?
Um,
Yeah, that's good.
and I think for the one of the biggest things f for us, a lot of us to work on is just the patience.
Yeah, because it's
The
a
pa
battle of wills. When it becomes a battle of wills, right? It's my will. This is the way I want it done. That
Yeah,
happened to me the other day. I just had come off being sick for a week, and I had a fever and everything else. And I'm sitting here at home with my grandson. I'm starting to feel better. I'm out of my bedroom, and he did something that just set me off. And I'm like, and I just barked at him, and he crumbled. He's just turned 6, and I was like, shoot, what did I do that for? That was stupid of me. It wasn't that big of a deal. But I kind of left him there. Now, when I was a younger dad, I would just like, it would piss me off because you're a young man, stand up, deal with it, let's go. Or, I've
yeah.
got my agenda. All of this stuff takes time. That's the hard part. Everything that you just talked about was like, I got to sit down, I got to slow down, I got to do all these things. But I recognize, and I think this is the thing that I didn't recognize when I was a new dad, was how big I am, how
Oh,
loud
yeah.
I am, how strong my voice is, and how scared I have made my child. And I looked at him crumbled, whimpering, and I was like, "Did I scare you, buddy?" And he just nods his head, and I'm like, "I'm so sorry, Pops. Didn't mean to scare you." And I just got down at his level, and I'm like, "I'm not mad at you." I yelled, and I shouldn't have done that, and I was loud, but that doesn't mean I'm mad at you. I'm not mad at you. I got loud, and
Well,
he
well, that
settled right down. Then it was like, wow, this is really, really interesting. How important it is to. It's hard to see the world through their eyes when you're wanting them to be the man, the young man, or it's like you're not teaching these lessons in these moments, right? I think we do a lot of that, or at least I did.
right, well, and though, and the fact, right, that you recognize it,
Yeah,
right, and take that moment because you're also teaching him, right, that what you just did, right, teaches him that if you ever get cranky and you yell at us or you yell at mom or you yell at dad, you know, you it happens. That's it, and then
we
then
all
once
lose
you
it.
cool
Yeah,
off or
yeah,
realize it,
yeah,
right, you can stop and say, "This is oh," because if we're trying to be perfect, number one, we can't.
yeah,
Right, and then we start bringing in all kinds of stuff about, well, if I'm supposed to be the perfect dad, well, why don't you just uh, back up one of those metaphorical dump trucks full of shame because you're not going to be perfect.
yeah.
So it's like,
Right, right,
okay, um, you know, that awareness to say, okay, wait, I didn't want to do it that way,
right.
and
Yeah,
then right, and it's not like magically once we decide we don't want to do something this particular way, it's not magically going to stop, right? Until we figure out some new ways to do it and we get some experience and we try it out. And I think the cool thing about our kids is um, they've got they give us a lot more leeway than we realize, right? If we can come back
yeah,
if the majority of the time um, you're you're there and you're loving dad, and then every once in a while you have the slip up or you're short tempered or something like that. It's like, yes, that stings, that hurts. But if they've got X amount of years, months, weeks
yeah.
of you being a loving dad, it's like, eventually you'll get to the point where they'll be like, "Hey, knucklehead, what did you do and where'd
Something's
dad
wrong.
go?"
Yeah,
Y-
exactly.
so
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's an important message there for dads. Is it, it's okay to admit you made a mistake. It's good for your kids to know that you do that because they do that too, and you're modeling that, right? Because
oh yeah, yeah, and just think too about um, what kind of dad do you want to be? Do you want do you want to be
give
the
me some
dad who,
options. What do you mean?
I mean, um, do you want to be the dad who spends most of his time flipping out and then apologizing?
Mm,
Or do you want to be the dad who most of the time doesn't flip out because you figured out some strategies,
yep.
right? From whatever's going to personally work, right? From the counting to 10 kind of basic stuff to realizing when you're not in a place to talk
Yeah.
and be the father that you want to be. Because it's okay to put yourself in a timeout, right? And say, look at, you know, son, daughter, this is important. I am too upset to talk about it rationally right now, right? I love you. We're gonna take a pause, and I want you to, or
Yeah, right.
whatever
I
that
need a
is,
break.
and
Yeah,
then
yeah. That's good.
yeah,
Yeah, I think
uh,
that uh, you were calling that uh, patience, I think, or yeah, and yeah, putting yourself on timeout. That's another good.
so when I have I think a really easy uh, litmus test when when like socially, right, meeting new parents if we're in some place, right, and basically it'll be something like we'll be talking, um, and I mention somehow that I've screwed up as a parent, right? Or some self-doubt that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And if the other parents are like, "Oh my goodness," I'm like, "Oh,
Tisk
I'm not
tisk.
hanging out with them." If the other parent responds with, "Oh man, you do that too," or "This is where I feel like I'm feeling," like, "Okay, we got some honest parents. We're gonna have a good time
Yep.
because we can share our fears, we can share our successes, and we can and nobody knows their kids better than they do. Nobody knows my kids better than Katie and I.
Yep.
So one of those things about um, advice that I'm not big on, right, is that I don't know your situation,
Right.
right? What your relationship is with your wife or your ex, or what your kids are. Some kids really benefit from a parent who's loose and laid back,
Yep.
right? And another kid in the same family might flounder with the loose and laid back because they need more structure to feel safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like
They're
there's
individual.
there's
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
yeah,
No
there's
one size
no
fits all.
no, that I think it's about
I have a funny
learning the
story
skills
about
that
that. It's related to
oh,
potty training, but we have 6 kids. So my first oldest is boy, and this just so clearly drew this out for me because I'm like, all right, we're going to work on potty training. And for him, what we did is we had the wee wee jar, and so in the wee wee jar, we drop a quarter into the wee wee jar, and when the wee wee jar was full, then we could get the toy, right? And so he wanted this truck. And so we had a picture of the truck. We put it on the refrigerator. It's like, all right, uh, when you're consistently every time you go wee wee on the potty, quarter in the jar, fill the jar, we get the truck. Every time you have an accident, we're going to take a quarter out of the jar, and the truck's just getting further away. So he had one accident, and he had a meltdown because I took a quarter out of the jar, and that was the only accident he ever had. 3 weeks later, we're off to the store. We go get the truck. Now, he changed his mind on what he wanted. I didn't care. Whatever you want, it's fine with me. Right? So now my daughter's coming along, and it's time for her. Get the wee wee jar, set up the whole scenario. She goes to the bathroom on the potty. We put a quarter in. She's all happy. Next time she has an accident, we pull a quarter out of the jar. She's just as happy. She's happy. Quarter's going in, quarter's going out. And it was like, wait a minute. I had a system here. I was going to write a book.
yes, right?
She's the artistic one. It did as long as hey, we're. It was like, oh, okay. I guess that doesn't work.
Yeah, it is crazy. There's been stuff out there. There's like for some people, it's it you know the and it sounds bad saying it just because there's uh, threatening your child. That's horrible. There's no need to threaten your child, but the threat of punishment for some people actually works.
Yeah,
For other people, not at all, and it's counterproductive,
yeah,
right? You know, or it just doesn't work. Period. But then
yeah.
it can be counterproductive. And then there's other people, and this is really cool. They found this out with energy stuff. uh, for energy bills. If you want to get people to uh, use less energy, if you give them a spiel about it's important, save the environment or something like that, energy use doesn't change
Mm.
for the most part. If you put in their bill a list of where they fit in among their neighbors and say, your neighbors averagely expend, 4 or whatever, and you do 5 or 6. Then I was in the 5 or 6, but well, crap, our neighbors are doing this. And that will actually get
The
people
competitive
to,
nature. Yeah. Interesting.
yes. And my wife works in healthcare, and there's like a doctor. If you want to make a disaster, go into a hospital and say, doctors, you must do this.
Mm.
And they'll be like, we're the experts, we trained, go to hell. you know, but if you say our hospital is going to to reach this goal, and here are the steps that we're going to do, right around, hand washing, surgery procedures, and
Yep.
say, do you want to be on board for this goal? They'll be like, yes, and do those things. So
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it's like like you said, so what did you come up with? If the coin jar only worked for the one but not the other, so what was your next, or
Yeah.
was it just
Well,
time until she did?
yeah, back to the drawing board, right? So yeah. So I think the whole idea of having a goal, having a reward, recognizing what's going on. So the only thing you can't teach somebody is motivation. You have to find the motivation. So what is it that they want to accomplish? So with my son, what he was able to do is he was able to make that connection because he wanted that truck. Uh, I don't think that my daughter really had any sort of connection or idea that was too much of a leap for her. But she
Mm,
didn't. So what we ended up doing, what she didn't want to do, she loved this. Uh, what was it? It was like a um, Dora the Explorer sheets and Dora the Explorer PJ. She had Dora Explorer everything. Well, you don't want to pee on Dora the Explorer. That actually worked way better because see, so
yeah,
it
that's
wasn't what I'm going to achieve. It was like, oh, I'm hurting something that's more important, right? So you just got to find that motivation. There's always a motivation, and think about yourself. Um, you don't want to be artificially motivated. You want to be really motivated, like truly
yeah,
self motivated. And I've always taught my kids, you're going to be disciplined. You either discipline yourself or someone else will be disciplining you. You can get a job,
yeah,
you got to be there from 9 to 5. That they're disciplining you. If you know how to discipline yourself, then you don't need a boss. Then you can own your own company, but not until then, right? So it's but then you'll have someone else to you're never away from it. But that is the idea. Is the key is finding a motivational frame within which that they can comprehend in an age appropriate manner. And it's even true for yourself, right? If you want to quit smoking, you're never going to do it unless you're actually properly self motivated. Because why? Otherwise, things get
yeah,
hard. And once you can't answer the why question, you're done. There's no more like, why am I putting
yeah.
myself through this? I don't have to, right? So I think that's a really important reason, is understanding those things that motivate you. And as a dad, I always say a dad is a title that you earn because, well, you adopted your kids. A lot of
Mhm,
dads happen to be dads just because, oops.
yeah.
Right? Now you are one. Okay. Well, do you have a vision for what you want? Um, I want to circle back to that for a minute, and I'm all over the map here, but I just find it interesting because you did adopt 2 kids, um, and I think, how did that go for you? How was that, you know, easy? You had to step into the dad role. Did they accept you as their dad? I know they were a little bit younger. Was there any challenges with that, or were the circumstances, what were the
Um,
circumstances surrounding all that?
well, the circumstances, right? That Katie was divorced. their dad was battling alcoholism.
Mm.
So in the beginning, from everything I've heard, he was a very loving dad the first couple years when they were little, which I'm so grateful for, right? But by the time, that I came into the picture, it'd been ultimately when I started dating Katie, they would spend weekends with their dad,
Yep.
and within a year or two, that was no longer possible
Ah.
because it wasn't a safe place for them to be.
Oh,
So yeah, that
that
was
was hard on
sucks. So
them.
that
Yep.
absolutely, and I think it was definitely hard on the
Everybody.
oldest,
Yep.
and so it was really two different, well, always with our kids, right? But two very different um, paths. For the youngest, I think he was protected from a lot of it from his older brother. So, and he was very young when we started dating. So for him, I think that it was it was pretty smooth,
Yep.
because I'm there, I'm playing with them, and then I'm there all the time, and it's just um, although, and I will, ah, I'm still Steve
Are you? Yep.
because of years of not being dad, except and I do love this when we're out somewhere and somebody's like, "Who's that?" And either one of them will go, "That's my dad." I'm like, "Oh gosh,
Thank
that
you.
that feels really good."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I know for for all that time, right? They meet me as Steve at first. And for the oldest, here's where that patience comes in, right? One of the things that I haven't said on is I did um, worked for the long time with teens in a mentoring program, and so I'd worked with a lot of boys from coming from divorced homes with a lot of dads who weren't around much, and
Mm-hmm.
so that gave me um, some good practice and some lessons in about, okay, so with the oldest, I need to be there, I need to be patient, and I need to let it be at, you know for me, be there, be present, and also know that this is going to be on his time frame,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Because and when before we combined houses and got married, right, and after we've been together, I would, have like I would have some time, right, come over, would do a Bob Ross painting
Oh, wow.
or something,
Yeah. Yeah.
right, and we'd do something and go back. So we started doing some small, activities together just to help, that go along. And it was, you know his schedule, be there, understand, and be comfortable with, he's not going to want to talk to me. He's going to go talk to his mom, and
Yep.
that's, um, and, I had a 10-year plan. Happy to say it only took 6 years
Okay.
for him
Yeah.
to
So
say, I
that's what I
love
was going to
you.
ask. It's a long term
It,
view. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and that was awesome. And we have um, it was great. Just the other day, oh, this is, so when I was younger, we lived a couple hours away from the Twin Cities. There's a great used bookstore called Midway Books. And my dad had a deal with me. He would take me to Midway Books when he was coming up for an Emotional Anonymous meeting. I'd sit in the parking lot, like in the summer, while he did the meeting. And then on the way back, we'd stop at the bookstore, which had a really great World War II collection, of
Mm.
books, and they were half price. And, I just had my allowance, and I'd have to use my allowance, and he was doing kind of a money teaching thing, right? And I remember one time we're driving home, it's a couple hours, and the whole thing is 6-7 hour stuff, and I had spent all my money on books, so I didn't have money for food, and so he just went into the Hardee's and ate food while I sat in the car, hungry. And I'm like, that always ticked me off. And he
Mm.
told, later, he's like, I'm sure I was trying to teach you something about money, seems kind of dumb. So fast forward 25 years. Yesterday, I took my oldest, who's home from college, to Midway Books. Right, we didn't have time for lunch because we were doing a last night at a Chinese place that he liked, and it was like, you know, we got in there, and he'd known the story, right? Because sometimes I'll share what, um, something that went well between me and my dad, or something that didn't, and have that balance, just so my boys are hearing me, and letting them realize that I know I'm going to make mistakes,
Mm.
and
Okay.
I want them to be at a place where they can say, "Hey, Dad, that really bugs me," or "that hurt," or "what's going on," and so we can have that conversation. So,
That's good.
and before he knew the story, so I'm like, all right, so We're going in, and first 3 books are on me. You you know, it's just it's because we're continuing an Anderson father-son tradition,
Mm,
but we're tweaking it for the new generation,
right, right.
you
Yeah,
know?
that's good.
And, um, it was fun because then I get to see which books that he picks out, right? Where
Yep.
his interests are, and he gets this awesome eclectic selection of books, one of which I never would have thought he'd pick a Western. He's not a Western guy, but he's like, "I wanna explore a Western." So he got Lonesome Dove, which is a classic. So it was,
Very cool.
you know,
Yeah.
it right, took something that bugged me, turned it into something, and my dad coming taking me, now that I'm thinking about it and talking about this out loud, my dad was trying to have some time with me.
Yeah.
But he wasn't trying, he was doing
He
it.
was doing it. Yeah.
It it didn't have the same impact as he thought it was, probably because I remember him eating while I'm sitting in the car,
Yeah.
and there's probably hours of us talking about something and having a good time, and I remember the negative.
The one bad thing.
Oh,
It's so funny.
dang.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, and there, I think there's an important lesson there is I think sometimes what we think we're doing a certain thing and our kids aren't actually receiving what we're doing.
Mm,
Right. It's like, this is what I was talking about earlier, that these lessons can be too advanced for them. They're not ready for that kind of lesson, right? They just know you didn't eat lunch with, I didn't get to eat. It's like, that's a pretty basic
yeah,
necessity. Right. And of course you might think that. Yeah. I think a lot of times I was trying to teach a lesson and they don't, they don't see it as a lesson. They see it as a moment in time. And this is happening to me. And now, like, what am I supposed to learn from this other than
right,
it was
and
an
dad's a
aggravating
jerk.
time? That's all I remember.
Yeah, that's a really good point, though, to think about. You absolutely right. We have lessons we want to impart on our children, but those lessons will be meaningless if they're not at the right time,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? When our kids are ready.
Good stuff.
Eh,
All right. Well, let's turn the corner here. I want to talk about the Best Dad program. Uh, and, so help me understand the vision behind it and kind of what's your unique approach there.
Right. Well, so I, the best part, and because I wanted to keep the title short, is about how to be the best dad in the moment,
Mm,
right? Because we're human, and what do you do to set yourself up with so that you're the best dad that you can be when you're tired, right? The best dad you can be when you're not tired, the best dad you can be when you're stressed. So it's that's
oh, interesting.
that underlying thing about the best isn't it, it's about um
So it's not about sit ups and
who's
push ups.
uh no, but maybe if
Yeah.
physical activity is something that you're that if that's something that's
Could
getting
be.
in the way of you being the father you want to be, and this is coming from a guy who lost 50 pounds,
Oh, nice.
right? Because I wanted to I wanted to be the dad that kept playing tennis, right,
Oh, there you
with my
go.
son. So,
Yep.
okay, Tubby, you need to that was I was big. And it was like, so that's one of the things is that, right, understanding that we're human, that and so how do we set ourselves up to be successful? And I think that the two things that I've combined and that I think are really crucial is there's the story that we tell ourselves, right? About what it means to be a dad, about what our children need, about who they are. And so that understanding those stories and finding out when they're accurate or not, that's huge.
Mm,
So understanding the stories that we're using to guide us is one part. And the other half, and this is where I talked about when I was as an educator, reading all these books about neuroscience and not the neuroscience article for neuroscience articles because those are still a mystery to me, right? But reading the brain rules and taking the stuff that's been putting away for the average college educated person to understand. And I took a course, a 14-week course, neuroscience for coaches, right? How to take these things, right, and apply them so you can be more successful. So half of it is looking at the story, half of it is using neuroscience. For example, you talked about motivation,
mm-hmm.
right? Motivation is in one part, and yes, absolutely. If you have to have a goal that you want as opposed to one somebody else has, right? And you have to think that it's attainable. But the other part is your goals are going to be shaped, if you get them or not, by the habits you have.
Mm.
And the habits that we have, right, are shaped in a huge part, by basically sort of like the pleasure circuit of the brain, right? And
Hmm.
dopamine,
Yep.
right? We do the things that give us that dopamine hit, which is why video games are so addictive. They're designed
Yep.
to give you that boss win every so often, and you keep going. It's like, yeah, we like that. So how you can use that though for yourself in like a new habit is you take the habit that you want to do and you break it down to the smallest, absolute smallest, easy thing to do to get you moving in that direction.
Love it. Yep.
a- And then you do it, right? Because you do it like, say, hey, I want to run 2 miles. Okay, well, how about you walk down the block first?
Yep.
And you say, okay, so here's my goal. I'm going to walk down the block. So you walk down the block and you come back, and your brain, you've been successful, releases dopamine, right?
Yep.
That's once, that's not enough, right? But then the next day, okay, hey, that felt good last time. Walk down the block, come back, hit dopamine. And then all of a sudden now you're changing the pathway that was set up for you to sit home and do nothing, or whatever it is that you were doing that wasn't physically active. And now you want, well, why not 2 blocks?
Yeah.
And you do the 2 blocks because it's easier.
Yep.
And you just keep building that circuit in your brain that now all of a sudden, this thing that you didn't like, you're actually getting pleasure from, and it gets easier to do. And for myself, um, I actually, I do one of the things I do in the I do in the morning is 30 minutes on the elliptical machine,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
I like it. If you would have told me at any time up until my life, till about 3 years ago, that said, "Hey, Steve, you're going to get on an elliptical machine and like," I'd be like, "You're crazy," right? And I started at about 7 minutes,
Yeah.
right? And then
Fantastic.
I got to 10, then I got to 20, and then I was doing 30 just flat easy. Then I'm doing 30 at a +3. Now I'm doing 30 at a +9. And it's just that I like it. I
Yeah.
don't
One.
have to beat myself up to
I
get
talked to,
there.
I talked about this in a previous podcast, but I set ridiculously small goals. That's what you just said, right? And it's either a yes or no. Tomorrow I can say yes or no. Did I get up and did I walk that block? Yes or no? No, you didn't. Okay, you're a loser. Okay. It's like,
Well,
right? No, it's like, that's the way I have to talk to myself. Like
I I I get that, and I may challenge the self-talk there,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But you found a system that's working for you. You know
That's,
what I mean? But
that's it.
it's in
I encourage
it.
myself through, yeah, come on, let's go. You got it. It's encouraging. But that's what I mean by it's so ridiculously low that if you don't do it, you are disappointed in yourself, right? Because, well, I use disgust as a motivation.
Okay.
Yep,
Well, and you know what too? Think about this, right? It's a personality thing too.
for sure.
For s- and that works for you, right? Problem. And hell, maybe it's super healthy for you, right? There might be somebody else who's got a really negative self-talk that's getting in the way of them being the dad that they could be, because why try this? I'm just I'm
Totally,
worthless,
totally.
or I can't do this.
100%. Yep. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Don't kick a man when he's
Yeah.
already down. Yes,
Yeah.
I have an
Hey,
overinflated view of myself, so that's why I have to beat myself up.
and maybe, right? Well, think about how many there's some guys who love razzing each other,
Yep.
right?
That's
And
it. Yeah.
sometimes it's fun, and sometimes knock it off. I
That's
don't
why
want
I
to
play
be.
hockey. Yeah, we're always razzing each other.
Yeah.
Good deal. So that sounds like a great program. I love what you're saying. So it's the stories we tell ourselves, and we need to understand those. And then you're applying some things that you learn from brain rules. I love that. Um, and so, how do how do people get involved with this? Tell me a little bit about you know you're doing coaching.
Sure.
How
Uh,
how does all
a
that work?
super easy thing, uh, uh, super easy thing to do is if you send me an email at steve@steveanderson.coach. And if you do that, because I want to, so I want to help as many men be better fathers as I can. So I'm doing that in multiple ways. And one of the things is I'm doing. I really believe that journaling can be effective. So if anybody out there sends me an email, I've got a nice little PDF 2-page thing on guided journaling that they can start using immediately. One of them is a set of questions that are used around just sort of, not sort of, that are used in a lot of different places for emotional regulation, sort of like, understanding, okay, I got so mad. What am I going to do with it? These 3 questions will give you a way to process those emotions that you're having. So that's explained in there. I've got another that I adopted it from, they use it in a lot of medical training,
Mm.
with doctors about something happened. So how do you actually make sure you learn a lesson from it? And there's a set of questions that I modified them for dads. And I have also believe it 7 or 8 strategies. I can't remember the number off the top of my head on just, things to keep in mind as you're doing this to get the most out of it. And, and I'd be happy to send that to anybody who sends me an email, and they can, the neat thing that I like about it is I think we need to be in community, right? With other men and women too, and that we can talk about, what we're doing in our roles are. And ultimately it's going to come down to each of us to decide about the dad we're going to be today.
Mm.
And journaling is a neat way where it's, it can be powerful, it can be a waste of time. But here's some questions. So if you ever open up a blank piece of paper and say, what the heck do I do? This will give you some,
Give you
well,
some
and you
prompts.
can
Yeah.
try it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if it works, awesome. Now you got a tool for the rest of your life, which is
Excellent. All right. And so I'll put it in the show notes, but it's Steve at steveanderson.coach. And Anderson is spelled, go ahead,
SON.
SON. All right. Not the Swedish version. Yeah. Or maybe I got that wrong. I don't know. Excellent. And let's see. So, Steve, really, is there anything else you want to add that we haven't, gotten to talk about, or any final
Um,
thoughts?
I just think for dads, if you know that it's ready to make that you want to change some things, right? Uh, I would say this: awesome. Start small and manage your expectations, because everybody around you is used to how you have been. And
Mm,
so you might have this, oh, I'm going to be different. And they're going to be, well, maybe you're going to do this for a week and be right back. Right. So, it sometimes it takes a long time for the people around us to believe that we're really making a change, or things are going to be different. And that's okay. So just know that, if you start small and start making these changes, I think we can set ourselves up for failure by thinking, right, if I might make a great plan with, one of my boys,
yeah.
and then they're like, "Well, that sucked." Like,
Right.
but that was the key. Is like, well, no, now,
I'm
it's
trying to
like, well,
spend quality time. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, right, and they're wrong. So, just know,
You could,
and we're dads for the long haul. So,
yeah, good,
uh,
good advice. Very good advice.
yeah,
Excellent. Well, this is a good place for us to end. We've covered a lot of ground here. Um, I think uh, you've brought a lot of insights, and I'm I'm gonna I'm gonna send you that email because I'm not a journaler. So,
absolutely.
did any tips on journaling for those that don't know how to do it? Is it you just start writing? You get a notebook. What do
Uh,
you do?
Yes. And so I'm going to throw this out. When it comes to journaling, and it's interesting, everything can be positive or negative, or everything's probably typically both,
Mm,
right? So, journaling, on the plus side, you can do all kinds of things by getting your thoughts out on paper. It's a way of actually moving it out of your head. And
yeah,
sometimes that's it. Some people even use it as like a tool to get an idea out so you don't have to carry it around,
yeah.
right? So sometimes it's a way. Now, journaling can also become very narcissistic,
Mm.
right? Where you're just writing about you and, oh, look what's been done to me, and
Ah.
so that's the danger side. One of the ways to avoid that, right, is to, you know, an easy way to avoid that sometimes is just, you know what? Put your son or daughter's name on the top of a page and start writing what you love about
Mm,
your son or daughter,
interesting.
right?
Okay, yeah, I can take the
Or
focus off
something,
you. Yeah. Yeah.
right? And then come back because we got to figure out our own stuff. But if you find yourself, right, just really just getting, if at the end of journaling you're more focused on yourself even more and less focused on your family, which could happen. Just go, oh crap, okay, tomorrow I'm putting
Yeah.
my child's name on the top,
Yeah.
and start from there. And that's, I think that would be a piece because it really. Oh, the other thing is, don't worry about your spelling. Who cares if you use full paragraphs? This is for
Just,
you. You do it for 5 minutes. You do it for 15 minutes.
just
Great.
get it
You know what I
down.
mean? There's
Yeah.
it. Um,
The Bible says that we are to hold our thoughts captive. And I think journaling is a way to do that. We actually
yeah.
capture them
Uh,
on paper. Food for
yeah.
thought.
And let's end with that. That's a good one.
Excellent. All right. Well, I definitely enjoyed getting to chat with you, Steve, and just want to encourage everybody uh, to get in touch with Steve, get a hold of this PDF that he's got. He'll send it to you. And have a great day. And thank you all for listening. Thank you for participating in Dad Mode, God, Grit, and Goals, where we are working on becoming better fathers, better husbands, better humans. I love you. Take care.